Scalability is another very important feature for SCADA systems. And if you're looking at evaluating how to future-proof a system going forward, looking at the ability of that system to grow is a big deal. You don't want to get a system that's going to force you to switch over to another system later on. So an ideal system really should allow your organization to build any kind of architecture that it needs, whether it's simple, whether it's a logger, whether it's a data collector, or whether it's a SCADA network that stretches really over a wide geographic area or something in between. The more scalable your system is, the more future-proof it is, because you'll be better positioned to adapt when any of those conditions change that you might need to adapt to. And we all know that adapting to change is something that's very important inside this industry. So questions to ask in this area about a SCADA system: how challenging will it be to scale that SCADA system out? How many kinds of architectures can you build with it? What are your options for different architecture types? Can it be deployed effectively at one site, at multiple sites, and the cloud? And can you mix and match between all of those? Can you add redundancy? And is redundancy an easy thing to add if you start out without redundancy and you want to add it later? Can you manage data and projects from one central location?
Kevin, thanks a lot. I just comment also on the queue of questions to our audience here. You are interested in this topic by the number of questions, so we are going to have plenty of time to get to all of those as we sort of wrap up this section here. But I think it's really critical to take a minute here on one item here. The next must-have feature is modern cybersecurity. And unfortunately, attacks on industrial targets are increasing in various forms. Whether it's phishing, malware, ransomware, data breaches, etc. And a few, recent examples that have been in the news, of course, the attack on Colonial Pipeline, the water treatment plant in Oldsmar, Florida, JBS beef plant. I mean, we're seeing more and more industrial attacks occurring. And if nothing else, I think these should be kind of a wake-up call about what can happen to industrial organizations and their customers. And so I don't know, we can't say that any software is 100% secure, obviously, but having software with modern security features is an important element of any solution you put together. So some questions you should ask as you really dig into this one is, does it support widely used encryption protocols like SSL and TLS? Does it support federated identity providers? Does it support two-factor or multi-factor authentication? Does it have a model for user permissions? Does it follow the Purdue model? So I think, Kevin, you and Jeremiah probably both have additional comments given your knowledge of security. So, and I know you've been pretty deep in it. So why don't I start with you, Kevin, then we'll go to Jeremiah.
Sure, yeah. So it's been interesting working with customers over the years as this has become something that is more and more important. In the old days, you used to have a controls network that was either completely siloed off from the rest of the system, or was set up in a way that had firewalls or that had different pieces of security that made it so that you didn't really worry on the OT network too much about security. And some organizations even had it open to the rest of their IT network that was allowing for communication between different items. And you didn't have the same attacks in the same way that you have today. At this point in the game, even without IIoT taken into consideration, with a modern SCADA system installed on the plant floor, it is important to take a look at these security considerations, especially the encryption, TLS 1.2, 1.3. Using the same encryption that your banking website uses is something that can really help protect organizations in the case that there is some sort of a network compromise. There's some sort of way that somebody makes it into the system over an open VPN connection, or somebody wanders into the factory and they plug into a network port. You still want to have protections in place to make sure that they're not going to be able to get into your SCADA system and do damage there. You want to have that protected. And then, on top of all of that, of course, going out over the internet that a lot of IoT systems do, and making that accessible on mobile devices when you're sitting at home. Having a mobile app there, having those security pieces in place to make sure that you're employing security best practices is really, really key when it comes to all of that. And so I just emphasize a few of the things that you said, Don, that it is really, really critical these days to have a system that has security at the forefront, that has security as not as an afterthought, but as something that is a core piece of the system overall.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. I totally appreciate your comments. It is critical. Jeremiah, from a practitioner's viewpoint, and you and what you see with your customers, your thoughts?
Sure. I think what I really like about IIoT style architectures is it allows for passive data collection on the control system side of things. Instead of interrogating or asking devices for information, or basically reaching in from the enterprise, with solutions that leverage edge, we can collect and push into the enterprise for data consumption. So then you can start to instantiate digital twins or operational twins at the enterprise and go from there.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Well, Kevin, I think I'd like you to bring us home with the last area that an organization should be looking at in evaluating a SCADA system. Clearly, what we've gone over here and from the questions I see in the queue here, there's a lot to be said for what we're asking our SCADA systems to do and provide to the organization. So quite a bit of coverage here. Go ahead and bring us home.
Sure. And I actually saw one question come in. We've had a lot of questions come in, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. But one that's specifically about this slide that I wanted to answer quickly. It says, how can we check the SCADA system and check it for its support of modern security? Well, what you see on the screen right here, these questions are intended to give you the ammunition to do just that. So asking these questions of the vendor, trying to get an understanding from the vendor of what they support. Do they support TLS 1.3? That's a really important question right there, because if they do, then they support modern encryption. If they don't, then they're behind in encryption. And that's going to be something that's important. They might only be a little bit behind. They might have TLS 1.2 support, which is still widely used. But if they have TLS 1.3 support, then they're right at the forefront, and they really care about security and being completely up to date. And federated identity providers, two-factor, multi-factor authentication, all of these are really important points here. And if you ask these questions, depending on the responses that you get there, you'll get a sense of if they do support modern technologies or if they don't. Some vendors do, some vendors don't, and some softwares from those vendors do, some softwares from vendors don't. So it's important to ask about the specific piece of software that you're considering evaluating or that you're running at the time to see what the options are for that piece of software. All right, and so then the last item that we have here, and I'll say last but not least, take a look at licensing. In specific, you really need to have an unlimited licensing model. So traditional SCADA licensing makes you pay for every different level of client and tag that you use. You might have ranges of 1 to 10 tags is X number of dollars, and 50 to 100 is X number of dollars. If you have unlimited licensing, you don't have to really worry about the number of tags that you have beyond what hardware actually supports. So you're talking more in the range of thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of tags before you're thinking about multiple servers and multiple licenses. Traditional SCADA licensing makes you pay for those different levels, right? And so it's difficult or impossible to add lots of sensors or devices under traditional licensing in an economical way. If you have unlimited licensing, this feature really is key to making it possible to expand the system without needing to feel constrained as you're doing it, which opens up innovation, opens up the ideas, and lets your engineers and lets the folks who are creating the systems really run wild and implement whatever that they want to. So questions to ask about the SCADA system: is it licensed by clients and tags, or is it licensed by the server? Will it cost more to add those clients, tags, and connections? Will scalability be affordable under the licensing model? And how will the licensing affect or limit the system's overall performance?